Hey everyone, Wednesday, April 8th. I shot this long video yesterday about the compression of relational space and physical space. And I wanted to take a few minutes today to just unpack more the relational space aspect. And sorry, hair, everything ends crazy. Went on a run earlier just to relieve stress. Came back to work, homework, meaning working at home, now going back out for a run again here just to kind of decompress and then come back to work, trying to get into a different routine. So my background, right, my family, right, there's an origin story about relationships, and depending on how you're raised, what background, you may have an origin story about relationships. I'm not familiar with every origin story, but I'll tell you the one, right? I was raised in a church and a tradition and a faith. There's a story about relationships. It's in the Bible. It takes place in the first book in the Bible, which is the book of Genesis. And there's this story where man, and I would say humankind, is alone in the garden, even though they have everything, right? Every need, every possible want, and even a relationship with, in my story, with God. And in any story, if you look at origin stories, relationship with the Creator, right, the highest being in the universe. You find out in this tradition that I'm a part of and other traditions where that's not enough. It's not good enough for humankind to be alone. And so in my story, in my origin story that I was raised in, God puts this man to sleep and creates this other person, this woman. And what I've always found interesting, when I went to seminary, we studied Greek and Hebrew, and really fascinating in the Hebrew text in Genesis is that Adam is described early on in Genesis as an earth creature. In the Hebrew, it's Adamah, and my Hebrew's not that great. But it's an earth creature without form, without essence, kind of almost without really gender. It's just this creature moving through the garden, really without a sense of identity. And it's not until later in Genesis, when Eve is created and Adam comes into relationship, into contact with Eve, that it changes, right? The earth creature changes from Adamah to Adam, to Adam. He now has form. He now has a sense of identity, a sense of self, right? And to me, it's a beautiful story about how we come into really knowing ourselves as we are in relationship with other people, right? Without other people, we don't often know ourselves. We don't really know who we are. And, you know, I would say that depending on how you were raised, often our own family of origin, and probably whatever you experienced, especially between the ages of 6 and 16, but we know now even earlier on, even in the womb and coming out of the womb, that early on, we are informed about relationships. And some of us grew up in families where it's all about closeness, and sometimes unhealthy levels of closeness, that who we are and our sense of self is dependent upon how close we are to people. In an unhealthy extreme, it's described as a fused family, an overly connected family, a family that is enmeshed together, where they almost lose identity and sense of self. They become one kind of just big being, right? And then there are families that are disconnected. They don't operate, they don't connect. That sense of identity and self is described as being kind of overly independent. And so depending on how you were raised, we're probably moving back and forth at any given time on that spectrum between one extreme of being overly connected, enmeshed, and being overly disconnected. And so it's important to pay attention to your own family of origin, your own story, how you're raised, again, the stories that informed you, whether it's a story from a faith perspective or a non-faith perspective, and how you view relationships. In my training as a marriage and family therapist, we talk about a healthy sense of self-relationship. Again, comes from this idea of self-differentiation, that I can be fully me while in relationship with someone else, that I don't lose who I am while in relationship with someone else. I think actually when people get married, I've started later on when I did some weddings and started working with couples, that phrase, like the two will become one, right? I think has actually been abused in many ways, and unfortunately, women have probably been on the wrong side of that. That when you got married, the two become one meant the woman is to kind of lose her sense of self and enter into that relationship with guy. I think that's changing, right? In some ways, in some places, but a healthy relationship is the two become one, but the two don't lose who they are. It's not like they are 100% and 100% and they give up 50%, 50% and they become one. No, the two become ones mean that we fully enter into relationship with other without losing our sense of self, without losing our sense of essence. In the words of my mentor, Terry Hargrave, in his research and study and his writings, that the two don't become one. The two create really a third identity, this sense of us or this sense of we, right? And so when I'm most healthy, I'm fully Rhett and my wife is fully Heather, and we have this we that we create, this sense of usness, right? When I'm unhealthy, I probably move away from people and distance myself from relationship, where other people, when they're not as healthy, they suffocate and they bombard the other person so that they can kind of figure out who they are. And so I think, again, with compressed relationships in this space, we are probably experiencing moving closer together, right? And trying to like figure who we are and our sense of self, and I need you, we need to be around you. And then we're also probably experiencing moving away, like I need some space from you. And the extremes are probably, and somewhere along the spectrum, we're experiencing it probably more rapidly, even on a given day. And so I think it's important just to, one, foster a sense of awareness about that and just kind of experience yourself through the day. My therapist would say, basically, shine a spotlight on you throughout the day and notice how you move on that spectrum from overly being connected to disconnecting. And just notice how you move and identify where you are, identify kind of where you want to be. In a lot of my workshops and in my office, I have these hula hoops. And a lot of you know this metaphor, but I'll have a couple stand up in my office and I'll have them both stand to one hula hoop, right? And so when they're in one hula hoop, it feels, it's too close, right? You feel suffocated. And even in some of the writings, like in re-engaged material, they'll talk about, hey, stand in your own hula hoop. Don't get in my hula hoop. This is my space. And so I'll pull out another hula hoop and I'll have the person stand their hula hoop, the other person stand their hula hoop, and we'll just create a little bit of distance. And so the hula hoops aren't even touching. They're more like close, right? It's a close, intimate connection, but I'm still fully I and you're still fully you. We're in relationship. We're not moving away from each other, and we're not on top of each other where I can't tell where the I and the you begin or end. And so I've been thinking a lot about that, just that relational space, and just it's important to take stock of and be aware of it and just understand where you fall on that. And I think do the work to not fall in either extreme, and to do the work of kind of taking agency and responsibility to move towards healthy self-differentiation and relationship with other people, whether that's a spouse, a partner you're living with, whether it's with kids, family, etc., etc. So hope that's helpful. There's some beautiful literature on it. I think the poets, Rilke and Khalil Gibran talk about it quite extensively in some of their beautiful writings. I think in the Khalil Gibran's book, The Prophet, his section on marriage has a beautiful kind of idea of this self-differentiation. So hope that helps today. Hope you guys are thinking about that. Go out into your day today, kind of process that, identify kind of where you are in that spectrum, and think about the work that you may need to do to grow into a healthy place. My mentor, Terry Hargrave, says that relationships are really about growing up, right? That relationships put us into connection with each other, that grow us up. That without that relationship, right, we're not challenged and we don't have the opportunity to grow. So now may be an opportunity to really grow and to become who we are meant to be. All right, have a good day. I'm out for a run. See ya.